The first time the overseers laughed at us, the sound came through every speaker on earth at once, a wet, chittering chorus that rattled windows from Reykjavik to Christchurch. They called it the announcement, but every human alive knew it for what it was, a punchline, a joke told by something that had never needed to fear anything in its 10,000-year reign across the spiral arm. The image on every screen was the same, a towering crush lord, all glistening obsidian plates and too many joints, leaning forward on a throne made of frozen screams, mandibles clicking like castanets. Behind him, the translated caption scrolled in perfect English. Observe the newest addition to the menagerie, a species that still measures time in single lifetimes. Adorable. Then the feed cut to a montage of human cities, our best warships, our children playing in parks, all set to that mocking laughter. They didn't even bother hiding the contempt. Why would they? The crush had ended civilizations the way you or I crush ants under a boot, and we were supposed to be next. My name is Elias Rook, former Marine, former prisoner, former dead man walking, and I was watching that broadcast from the bottom of a labor pit on Luna where the gravity feels like God sitting on your chest, and the air tastes like rust and broken promises. Around me, 10,000 others stared up at the cracked holoscreen bolted to the cavern roof, faces lit corpse blue by the crush feed. Some cried, some prayed, a few just went blank, like someone had flipped the off switch behind their eyes. I did none of those things. I laughed, couldn't help it. The sound crawled out of my throat raw and ugly, echoing off the rock until the guards started twitching their shock whips in my direction. One of them, a four-armed Thasian mercenary who'd taken my left eye 6 months earlier for looking at him funny, scuttled closer. Something funny, mammal, he hissed, voice like knives on glass. I spat blood onto the regolith and grinned up at him with the half of my face that still worked. Yeah, I said. You idiots just told the worst joke in the galaxy, and the punchline's gonna kill you. They beat me for that. Of course they did. Cracked 3 ribs, shattered my jaw in 2 new places, left me bleeding in the dark while the work shift kept digging for the iridium the creche needed to build more throne rooms. But pain's an old friend, and darkness gives you time to think. Time to remember. Time to plan. See, the thing about humans is we've been the universe's punchline before. Plague, war, famine, ice ages, asteroids, you name it. Something bigger than us has tried to wipe the board clean. Every time, we crawled out of the mud, flipped the bird at the sky, and kept going. The creche never learned that. They thought surrender was the end of the story. They never bothered to read the last chapter, where the quiet ones start sharpening their teeth. 3 levels down, in the black market med bay run by a disgraced Vorak surgeon who owed me a favor at the size of Texas. A woman named Mara Valdez was waiting with a stolen neural lace and a smile sharp enough to cut steel. She used to fly interceptors for the Pan American Union before the surrender. Now she smuggled hope in the form of black market code and contraband coffee. When she saw what was left of my face, she didn't flinch, just handed me a cup of real Colombian, strong enough to wake the dead, and said, "Heard you made a Thashan cry today, Rook, ready to make a Crush Lord choke on his own tongue." I took the coffee, burned my throat, and felt something ignite behind my ribs that had been cold for 3 years. "Darlin'," I told her, "I was born ready." Word spreads fast when people have nothing left to lose. From the lunar pits to the forced labor farms on Mars, from the cannibalized shipyards in orbit to the drowned cities under the Pacific reclamation domes. The message went out the only way it could, whispered in dead languages, scratched into walls, hidden in the static between crushed propaganda bursts. Just 3 words, over and over, until they became a heartbeat. Not yet, not yet, not yet. The overseers thought they'd broken us. They cataloged our cultures like butterflies pinned to a board, turned our flags into doormats, melted our monuments into slag. They put governors in our skies and collars on our heroes. They laughed, because to them we were relics, museum pieces that had somehow learned to bleed. They never noticed the ones who stopped bleeding outward and started bleeding purpose. On the night the Creche threw their victory gala, broadcasting live from the orbital palace they debuilt out of the melted down hulls of our surrender fleet, 100 million humans across the system looked up at the same moment. The feed showed Crush nobles drinking from cups made of human skulls, toasting 10,000 years of unchallenged dominion. The Supreme Lord raised his chalice and declared, in that wet, clicking voice, to the punchline that finally learned its place. That was the exact moment the lights went out. Every screen went black. Every caller went dead. Every containment field flickered and died like a snuffed candle. In the sudden silence, you could hear a billion held breaths let go at once. Then a new feed hijacked every channel, every implant, every dreaming mind, still brave enough to hope. My face filled the sky, scarred one-eyed, grinning like death on a bender. Behind me, Mara stood with a pulse rifle older than both of us, and behind her, an army that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 goddamn years. I looked straight into the lens, straight into the compound eyes of every crush watching, and I told them the joke. The crush walk into a bar, I said, voice raw but steady. Bartender says, "Why the long face?" Crush says, "Because we just enslaved a species too stupid to know when it's beaten." Bartender laughs, pours a drink, and says, "Buddy, you just bought the wrong humans." I leaned closer. Let them see the teeth. See, the joke's on you. We've been the punchline our whole history, and every single time, we get back up swinging. You should have killed us when you had the chance. Because now, I smiled, and it wasn't nice. Now it's our turn to laugh. Somewhere behind me, Mara chambered around that sounded like the end of the world. The feed cut to static, and across every human world, in every dark hole and broken city, the same 3 words that had kept us alive for 3 years finally changed. Not yet became now. The war started with a joke, and it was going to end with the punchline written in fire across the stars. Nowhere was safe. Not for them. Not anymore. The lights came back on in sections, red emergency strips bleeding across the lunar catacombs like arterial spray. And every face that looked at me carried the same question. What the hell do we do now? I didn't have an answer yet, just a busted jaw wired shut with scavenged carbon fiber and a heart beating so hard I tasted iron. Mara grabbed my elbow, fingers digging in like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. "Rook," she whispered, voice cracking for the first time since I'd known her. "Tell me you've got more than a punchline." I wanted to give her the speech. The one about destiny and unbroken spirits, and all the pretty lies we used to sell ourselves before the sky fell. Instead, I just pressed my forehead to hers, felt her tremble, and said the only truth I had left. "I've got you." That's gonna have to be enough for now. We moved deeper into the warren of abandoned mining tunnels. The Krush never bothered mapping because their drones couldn't T-fit. Behind us, the first real firefight of the uprising echodation, mercs screaming as human miners turned broken drill arms into rail lances and shoved them through carapace like it was tissue. Every boom felt like a heartbeat returning to a species that had been clinically dead for 3 years. But victory has a price, and the bill always comes collectible in blood. Mara led me to Shaft 19, a collapsed section we'd kept secret even from most of our own. Inside, past false walls and pressure traps rigged from old oxygen bottles, was the closest thing we had to a home. A single hab module the size of a cargo container, walls covered in photographs printed on contraband synth paper, Earth real, Earth blue oceans, green continents, clouds like cotton somebody hadn't yet set on fire. In the center hung the one that always gutted me, my daughter Lila, age 7, gap-toothed grin and pigtails, holding a hand-painted sign that read, "Daddy fixes stars." The picture was taken the day before the Kresh fleet darkened the sun. I hadn't seen her in 4 years. Didn't he know if she was still alive and the children? S3 education Karche on Titan, or if they de-repurposed her when she hit puberty and started asking the wrong questions. Every night I dreamed of her voice calling me through vacuum, and every morning I woke up reaching for a ghost. Mara watched me stare at that photo the way a man stares at a grave he dug himself. She knew better than to offer comfort. She de-lost her entire squadron when the Pan-American carrier Veracruz tried to ram the Kresh flagship and got turned into confetti for its trouble. All she had left of them was a flight patch sewn inside her jacket, and a promise she de-whispered over 23 funerals broadcast on delay so the Kresh could laugh at our grief. We were 2 people held together by missing pieces. "You ever think," she said quietly, checking the seal on a stolen Kresh plasma carbine, "that maybe we're not the good guys in this story? That all we were doing is dragging the whole species into a fight we already lost once?" I laughed. The sound ugly even to me. "Good guys, darlin'. The good guys surrendered. The good guys lined up for callers. The good guys watched their kids get taken and told themselves it was for the greater peace." I tapped the scar where my left eye used to be. "I'm not good. I'm just too stubborn to die polite." She studied me for a long second, then stepped close enough that I smelled gun oil and real coffee on her breath. "There's a difference between stubborn and suicidal. Elias, if we throw everything at them now, raw, no plan, they glass the planet just to make a point. Billions die. Maybe Lila dies." My knees almost buckled when she said the name out loud. Nobody had said it out loud in years. "We need to be smart," she went on. Softer. Smarter than anger. Smarter than revenge. I wanted to argue, wanted to scream that smart got us enslaved, smart got us kneeling, smart watched the Kresh melt the Statue of Liberty into a chamber pot for some minor prince. But she was right, and that truth tasted worse than lunar dust. So I did the only thing I could. I kissed her like a man, drowning kisses the last breath in the room, hard and desperate and terrified it would be the final time. When we broke apart, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "We do this surgical," she said. "We cut out the heart, not burn the body." That was the night the resistance stopped being a dream and started being an organization. We called ourselves the Punchline because the crush still thought the joke was on us. Mara took ops, I took propaganda and wet work, and a one-armed Russian engineer named Katya Volkov handled the impossible, turning scrap, spite, and stolen crush tech into weapons that didn't exist 6 months ago. Katya had survived the fall of Novosibirsk by hiding in a sewer with her 6-year-old son for 9 days. When the crush finally dragged them out, they took the boy for genetic optimization and left her alive as a warning. She built her first bomb out of a toy truck and reactor coolant. Now she built Starship killers and smiled while doing it, because every explosion carried her little boy's name. We started small. A supply convoy ambushed in the asteroid belt. A crush governor broadcast eating his own tongue after we spiked his nutrient bath with neurotoxin. A children's crochet on Europa quietly emptied one night, 200 kids vanishing into the ice tunnels, with only a handwritten note left behind. "Joke S on you." Each op was a message carved in fire. We are still here. We are still human. And we remember. But the closer we got to real victories, the more the cracks in us showed. Mara began having nightmares where she pulled the trigger on human collaborators, people who'd chosen safety over species, and woke up screaming that we were becoming the monsters we fought. Katya drank homemade vodka until she passed out, hugging the detonator for a nuke big enough to crack a moon. And me, I kept seeing Lila in every dark corridor, kept hearing her laugh in the static between transmissions. Some nights I sat alone with a pistol and a bottle of pills and tried to calculate if the universe would be better off without Elias Rook dragging it into war. The only thing that ever stopped me was the memory of her tiny hand in mine the day I taught her to flip the bird at thunderstorms. Then came Vostok Station. The crash had turned the old Russian research base on Titan into a re-education facility, 12,000 human children between 5 and 15, all of them having their memories overwritten with loyalty protocols. Intel said Lila was there. I didn't ask how Mara found out. I just loaded every magazine I owned and started walking toward the shuttle bay like a man already dead. Mara intercepted me at the airlock, eyes blazing. "You go in hot. You get them all killed," she said. "We do it my way stealth insertion. Extract the kids, blow the servers out before they know we were there." I told her my way was faster. She told me my way was selfish. We fought like two people who'd forgotten how to be gentle, words cutting deeper than any blade. Until Katya stepped between us with a live grenade in each fist and said in her calm Siberian accent, "Children are waiting. Decide if you want to save them or orphan yourselves." We went in Mara's way. 72 hours of zero-G insertion, hacked crush patrol routes, silenced weapons, and prayers in languages nobody spoke anymore. I found Lila in dormitory 7. Taller, thinner, eyes too old for a 10-year-old, but alive. When she saw me, she didn't run into my arms like in the movies. She just stared, head tilted, and asked in perfect crush click speak, "Are you the enemy my teachers warned me about?" Something inside me died right there on the spot, quieter than any explosion. Mara grabbed my hand before I could fall apart, squeezed one steady and whispered, "We get her out first. Then we fix the rest." Together we made it out with 11,987 kids and left the facility a crater full of fire. But as our stolen shuttle burned atmosphere away from Titan, I held my daughter while she screamed and fought and called me a monster in 3 alien languages. And I understood the real war had only just started. The crush had taken more than our freedom. They'd taken who we were. Mara sat across from me, cradling a little boy who'd hidden in her armor the whole escape, and met my eyes over his sleeping head. "Still think stubborn's enough?" she asked, voice raw. I looked down at Lala, my little girl, who didn't know my name any Mirand, felt the old rage shift into something colder, cleaner, unstoppable. "No," I said. "But love might be." Outside the viewport, Saturn's rings glittered like broken glass, and somewhere beyond them the crush armada was already turning toward the disturbance called humanity. They still thought this was about survival. They had no idea it had just become personal. The shuttle limped into the dark side of Rhea with half an engine and a cargo bay full of screaming, half-brainwashed kids. We'd burned every favor, every drop of luck, and most of our fuel getting clear of Titan. But the sky behind us was already crawling with crush interceptors, sleek black needles that moved like sharks smelling blood and vacuum. Mara was forward in the cockpit, coaxing the dying reactor with prayers and profanity in equal measure, while Katya and I tried to keep the children from ripping their own seat restraints off. Leela sat apart from the rest, knees drawn to her chest, rocking and whispering crushed catechisms under her breath. Every time I reached for her, she flinched like I was the monster under the bed. That hurt worse than the shrapnel still lodged in my thigh. Then the Combs lit up with a voice I never expected to hear again. Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Daniel Rook, Terran Defense Force, calling on open channel. Identify yourselves or be fired upon. My own last name punched the air out of my lungs. For one stupid second, I thought it was a recording. Some cruel crash pipes up. Then the shuttle's cracked screen flickered and there he was. My little brother, alive, in uniform, sitting on the bridge of a ship that shouldn't exist. The TDF had been dissolved the day we surrendered. Every officer either collared or executed. Yet Danny's face older, harder eyes like winter filled the cockpit, and behind him hung the blue and white banner nobody had flown in 3 years. Mara spun in her chair. Rook, is that real? Before I could answer, Katia's hand clamped on my shoulder hard enough to bruise. Trap, she hissed. Has to be. But the interceptors broke off pursuit the moment Danny's ship, decloaked a massive, ugly wedge of human steel bristling with railguns and missile tubes that looked cobbled together from a dozen different graveyards. The crush scattered like roaches when the light comes on. Danny's voice returned, softer now, almost broken. Eli, Jesus Christ, tell me that's you. I hit the transmit before doubt could stop me. Danny, how the hell are you flying that thing? Long pause. Then, get aboard. We need to talk where the crush aren't listening. We docked inside a hangar that smelled of weld torch and old blood. The ship was the USS Defiant, supposedly scuttled over Mars the day the surrender was signed. Turns out a chunk of the crew had faked the self-destruct, gone dark, and spent 3 years cannibaling every black market part and desperate engineer they could find. Danny met us on the deck himself, no honor guard, no ceremony, just my kid brother, taller than I remembered, hugging me so hard my cracked ribs sang hallelujah. When he let go, he looked past me to Lila, and something in his face crumpled. They told me she was dead, he whispered. They told me you both were. The reunion lasted exactly 30 seconds before the alarm started. Crush Battle Group dropping out of fold space, less than 200,000 clicks and closing. Not the usual patrol, this was a full retribution fleet. 20 capital ships and a dreadnought big enough to cast a shadow across continents. Their herald broadcast on every frequency. The rogue vessel, Defiant, and all souls aboard are declared abominate. Surrender the children for immediate termination. Resistance will result in the extinction of your species within the next solar day. Danny didn't flinch. He just looked at me and said the sentence I'd been waiting 3 years to hear. We not surrendering anything ever again. But the math was brutal. Defiant was a miracle, but she was one ship. We had maybe 6 hours before that fleet turned us into expanding plasma. The kids needed evac, needed deprogramming, needed a childhood that hadn't been stolen. And the crush had just moved the end of humanity forward from eventually to buy breakfast. Danny took me to the war room, a converted mess hall with hand-drawn star charts pinned to the walls, and laid out the play nobody wanted to say out loud. Deep-range scans had picked up a Kresh doomsday device in orbit over Earth, a gravitic imploder keyed to human biosignatures only. If the fleet failed to bring us to heel, the Lord Commander would collapse the planet into a black hole the size of a city block. 8 billion people, gone. Not conquered, erased. There's a way to stop it, Danny said, voice flat. But it's a one-way ticket. He slid a data slate across the table. Mission profile. A single stealth shuttle, 1 pilot, 1 warhead the size of Manhattan. Fly it straight down the dreadnought's throat. Detonate inside the command nexus. The backlash fries every Kresh neural link in the system including the failsafe on the imploder. Humanity lives. Pilot doesn't. I stared at the slate until the words blurred. You're volunteering, I said. I've been volunteering for 3 years, Eli. This is just the first time it'll matter. Mara stepped out of the shadows. She'd been listening the whole time. Bullshit, she snapped. You've got a crew of 400 who worship you. You die. This ship falls apart, and the resistance dies with it. We need you alive to lead. Danny gave her the saddest smile I'd ever seen, and I need my brother to raise his daughter. Pick one. The room went quiet enough to hear the reactor thrum. Then Katya spoke up from the doorway, voice calm as Siberian snow. There is third option. She held up a small black cube, no bigger than a child's toy. Crush command carrier runs on distributed consciousness. Cut the head, body dies, but cube is quantum entanglement mine. Planted in their core, every Crush ship and system drops dead at once. Same result, no suicide run. Danny frowned. Where the hell did you get that? Built it, she said simply. From parts of the re-education servers we blew up on Titan. Their own loyalty code, turned inside out. But someone still has to carry it inside. Shields will shred any drone, needs warm body. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. I actually laughed because of course it came down to this. The one-eyed convict, the broken father, the man who'd already died 1,000 times in his head. I looked at Lila's empty chair where she'd been 5 minutes earlier and realized she'd slipped away again, hiding somewhere in the vents like a feral cat. My daughter didn't even know who I was, and now I had the chance to make sure she never had to learn what a black hole tastes like. I'll do it, I said. Mara started to argue, but I cut her off with a look that had ended fights in worse places than this. You wanted surgical, I told her. This is surgical. Danny tried to pull rank, tried to pull brotherhood, tried every card a little brother has. I just hugged him once, hard, and whispered the words our dad used to say before every deployment. Watch the skies, kid. I'll be in them. They gave me a captured crash-boarding torpedo sleek, fast, and packed with enough stolen cloaking tech to slip past a blind god. Katja kissed both my cheeks and pressed the cube into my hand like it was her son's heart. Mara kissed my mouth like it was the last thing she'd ever do. And maybe it was. As the torpedo launched, Defiant broke cover and charged the enemy fleet head-on. All guns blazing, drawing every eye and every gun. I watched her on the tiny screen as she carved a path of fire through the void. My brother standing on the bridge like a man who'd already won. The dreadnought loomed ahead, a mountain of black chitin and hate maw opening to swallow me whole. I armed the cube. Leela's voice crackled across the open channel. Somehow she'd found a headset. Somehow she was listening. Daddy, she asked, small and uncertain, using the word for the first time since Titan. I closed my eyes, saw her gap-toothed grin under earth-blue skies, and answered with everything I had left. Watch this, baby girl. Daddy's about to tell the best joke in the galaxy. The torpedo slipped between the dreadnought's teeth, and somewhere behind me, 8 billion humans held their breath, waiting to see if the punchline would save them, or end them. The torpedo punched through the dreadnought's gullet at 0. 3C and the universe folded in on me like a fist. The cloak burned out in the first 10 seconds. Alarms howling, whole plating peeling away in white-hot ribbons. I had maybe 90 seconds before impact, and every one of them tasted like copper and goodbye. I kept my eyes on the little green diode that said the cube was still armed, still happy, still ready to turn the entire Crush command net into a vegetable. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Then the dreadnought's internal defenses woke up. They weren't guns, they were nightmares. Black tendrils of smart matter whipped out of the walls, faster than thought, punching through the torpedo's cockpit and straight into my chest. Pain detonated white behind my eyes as the filaments burrowed, looking for nerves, looking for control. I felt them crawl up my spine like frozen spiders, whispering and crouch, trying to hijack the meat before the meat could finish the job. My arms locked, legs locked, mouth locked open in a scream that never made it out. The cube slipped from my numb fingers and clattered across the deck, green light blinking like a dying firefly. 40 seconds to impact. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, could only watch as the dreadnought's core loomed closer. A pulsing red heart the size of Manhattan, and know I was about to fail every single person I'd ever loved. Then Lila's voice cut through the static, small and furious and mine. Daddy, you promised. The tendrils tightened, trying to crush the memory of her voice, but memory is a human thing, and humans don't let go easy. I remembered her first steps across the cracked concrete of Camp Leowen, remembered her laugh when I taught her to flip pancakes and flip the bird in the same motion. I remembered Mara's mouth on mine 30 minutes ago, tasting like gunpowder and coffee, and the last honest thing in the galaxy. I remembered Katya pressing the cube into my hand and saying in her quiet Siberian way, "Make it count, Tovarish." For all the little ones. Something snapped inside me. Not bone, not hope. Something meaner. Spite? Maybe. The same spite that kept us alive through ice ages and world wars, and now this. I bit down so hard my teeth cracked, tasted blood, and used the pain like a ladder. One finger twitched, then another. The tendrils screamed high-pitched inhuman and tried to lock me down again. But pain is an old friend, and I had miles of it stored up. I dragged my arm 6 inches through what felt like molten glass, wrapped my fingers around the cube, and slammed it against the nearest bulkhead port with everything I had left. Green turned red, armed. The tendrils went berserk, ripping me open from sternum to spine, trying to tear the cube loose. I laughed, actually laughed, because they still didn't get it. You don't stop a human with pain, you stop a human with nothing left to lose, and I'd cashed that chip a long time ago. 10 seconds! I keyed the open channel with a thought that cost me the last of my blood. Mara, I croaked, tell my girl, her old man fixed the stars. The torpedo hit the core dead center. For one perfect silent heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then the cube woke up. I didn't see the explosion. I felt it, like God reaching down and squeezing. Every crushed neural link in the system lit up at once. 10 million alien minds suddenly staring into the abyss of their own code turned against them. The dreadnought convulsed, bulkheads buckling, atmosphere flash burning into plasma. Somewhere far away, the Retribution fleet went dark, ships drifting like corpses, crews trapped in their own skulls, screaming forever. The gravitic imploder over Earth powered down mid-cycle, the black hole winking out before it ever formed. But inside the core, I was still alive. Barely. The torpedo's cockpit was gone. My suit was gone. Most of me was gone. I floated in vacuum and fire, lungs collapsed, heart fluttering like a trapped bird, and the only thing keeping me conscious was the sight of Defiant on the emergency feed, still fighting, still burning, still refusing to die. Danny's voice came over the channel, ragged and young and breaking. Eli, Eli, talk to me, God damn it. I tried. Nothing came out but blood that boiled away before it left my mouth. Mara's voice cut in, closer, raw. Rook, you beautiful bastard, you did it. The fleet's dead. Earth's safe. Come home. Home. Funny word for a man with no lungs left. I managed one last push on the transmitter. Tell Lila jokes on them. Then the pain finally caught up and the dark rushed in like a tide. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Because humans don't know when to quit, and apparently neither do the people who love us. I woke up in agony so complete it looped around to peace. Tubes down my throat, wires in my brain, machines breathing for me. The first thing I saw was Mara asleep in a chair beside the bed, still in her flight suit, face streaked with grease and tears she'd never admit to. The second thing was Lila curled against my side, small hand clutching mine like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. She was whispering something over and over, the same 3 words, soft as a prayer. Daddy fixed stars. Daddy fixed stars. Danny stood at the foot of the bed, eyes red, arms crossed so tight his knuckles were white. When he saw me looking, he tried to smile and failed. Welcome back, asshole, he said. You were clinically dead for 11 minutes. Katya rebuilt your heart out of a crushed power cell in spite. You're basically a cyborg now. Try not to die again, okay? Paperwork's a nightmare. I wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, wanted to hold my daughter until the universe made sense again. Instead, I just squeezed her fingers with the one part of me that still worked and felt her squeeze back twice as hard. Outside the viewport, Earth turned slow and blue and unbroken. No callers, no overlords. Just 8 billion humans trying to remember how to be free. The war wasn't over. There were still Krish holdouts, still collaborators to hunt, still scars that would never heal. But right then, in that tiny medbay with my family breathing the same recycled air, I understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans don't win because we're stronger or smarter or kinder. We win because when everything is stripped away, when the last light goes out and the last hope dies, we look at the dark and say, not today, and the dark learns to be afraid. I closed my eye, felt Leela's heartbeat against my ribs, and for the first time in 3 years I slept without dreaming of falling. Somewhere out there, the next fight was already coming, but for now, the punchline had landed, and the galaxy was never going to laugh at us again. They told us the war was over. They lied. 6 weeks after I crawled out of that medbay with a crushed power cell for a heart and my daughter's hand in mine, the sky cracked open again. Not with invasion ships this time. With silence, every crushed transmitter in the system went dead at once, then every relay in the sector, then every beacon clear to the galactic core. 10,000 years of chittering empire reduced to static in the space of a heartbeat. We thought I'd done it. We thought the cube had burned their hive mind to the ground. Turns out I'd only cut the puppet strings. The real monster was still waiting backstage, and it had been terrified of us the whole time. It started with the dreams. Every human left alive, collared or free, soldier or child woke up screaming the same night. Not pain, memory. Someone else's memory. 1 billion alien lifetimes poured into our skulls like molten glass. The rise of the Krish, their first wars. Their discovery of something buried under Antarctica 65 million years ago. Something they sealed away with every weapon they had and then spent every day since praying would never wake up. We saw their emperors weep. We saw their scientists burn entire star systems just to keep the seals intact. And at the center of every nightmare, one word carved into the walls of reality itself in a language older than stars. Homo, human. Mara found me on the observation deck of the Defiant, staring at Earth like it had personally betrayed me. My new heart was hammering so hard, the monitors in my chest kept throwing alarms. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She'd seen it too. Everyone had. They weren't conquering us, I said, voice raw. They were containing us. She laughed then. Short, sharp. The sound of a woman who'd just realized the monster under the bed had been hiding from her. All this time, we thought we were the punchline. Turns out we were the goddamn bomb. The proof came 3 days later. A crashed dreadnought, the last one still moving under its own power, limped into Seoul on emergency thrusters and broadcast a single message on every frequency, human and alien. In perfect English, do not wake it please. We will leave. We will never return. Just let the seals stay closed. Danny wanted to glass the ship on principle. Katya wanted to board it and gut the crew for sport. I wanted to believe them. Then the onboard AI, some ancient human prototype we'd thought lost when the surrender happened, finally finished decrypting the Antarctic vault telemetry we'd been feeding it since the dreams began. The message it spat out was only 4 words long, and it turned every victory we'd bled for into ash. Project Cain is active. Turns out 65 million years ago, something came to Earth. Not aliens, not gods. Us future humans maybe, or parallel humans. Doesn't matter. They were running from a war that had already sterilized half the universe, and they needed a place to hide the weapon that ended it. A weapon built from the only thing the enemy couldn't fight, raw, unfiltered humanity. They buried it under 2 miles of ice, set it to sleep until the species that dug it up again was angry enough, crazy enough, desperate enough to use it. Then they left us a note in the only language that lasts. When you are ready to burn the heavens, we will be waiting. The Kresh found the vault first. Spent 10,000 years making sure nothing ever opened it. Built their whole empire around keeping us too weak, too divided, too scared to dig deep enough. Every invasion, every genocide, every collar around our necks wasn't conquest. It was quarantine. And I just killed the jailers. Deep under the Ross ice shelf, something stirred. Seismic stations on 3 continents registered a heartbeat the size of a mountain. The ice began to crack in perfect circles, spirals, symbols nobody had ever seen but every human suddenly understood. Children on every continent started speaking in that same ancient language, eyes glowing soft gold. Lila woke up one morning, looked at me with eyes older than her face and said, "It's time, Daddy. They're scared of us for a reason." I wanted to tell her no. Wanted to lock her in a bunker and pretend the galaxy could stay quiet. But I'd spent 3 years learning one unbreakable truth. You, Dan, get to choose when humanity stops being afraid and starts being dangerous. You only get to choose whether you stand in front or get out of the way. So, we went to Antarctica. The whole damn circus. Defiant, every ship we could steal, fly, or pray into orbit. A fleet of refugees and orphans and walking wounded sailing to meet the thing our ancestors left behind like a loaded gun buried in the backyard. The last crashed dreadnought tried to ram us on the way down, screaming warnings in 17,000 dialects. Danny put a rail slug through its core and whispered, "Too late." We landed on ice that sang under our boots. The vault door was 30 kilometers wide, carved from a single piece of neutronium, and it opened for us the way a flower opens for the sun. No codes, no weapons, just recognition. Inside was a chamber big enough to park continents in, and at the center floated a man, or what used to be a man. Naked, hairless, eyes like dying galaxies, he looked at us the way a father looks at children who finally came home from a very long, very ugly war. When he spoke, every human on Earth heard it in the bones. "You woke clean," he said, voice gentle and terrible. "Most don't. Most tear themselves apart the first time they touch what you are. But you carried the fire through slavery and didn't let it burn you hollow. I'm proud." Leela walked forward without fear, took his hand like greeting an old friend, and the glow in her eyes matched his. "What happens now?" I asked, voice cracking on every word. He smiled, and the temperature in the chamber rose 10 degrees. "Now you stop being prey. Now you remember what the universe forgot." He raised one hand, and every view screen on Earth lit up with the same image. Galaxies burning, species older than stars kneeling, something vast and many-eyed screaming as human ships carved it open like fruit. The enemy that chased us here is still coming. It learned our shape and decided the multiverse would be safer without it. We disagreed. Mara stepped up beside me, rifle hanging loose, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on her cheeks. "So what are we?" He looked at her, at Danny, at Katya, at the thousands behind us, and the pride in his eyes was brighter than any sun. "You," he said, "are the apex. The final expression of a universe that learned to fear its own reflection. You are why entropy hesitates. You are the reason the dark between stars has nightmares." Then he placed his hand on my chest, right over the crash power cell that had kept me alive, and the burn was pure light. "The seals are broken. The war is over. The next one begins when you say it does." I looked at my daughter, glowing like a promise. At my brother, fist clenched so tight, blood ran between his fingers. At Mara, who met my eyes and smiled the most dangerous smile I'd ever seen. I thought of every caller, every child stolen, every grave we dug with our own broken hands. And I gave the only answer humanity has ever had when someone tells us the universe is too big, too old, too cruel for us. Bring it on. The chamber door sealed behind us. The ice flash melted into an ocean of steam, and somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something ancient felt the chains snap and began to run. It was never about beating the crush. It was about reminding existence why it should be afraid of us in the first place. The punchline wasn't that we won. The punchline is that we were just getting started. The thing that had been chasing us across realities didn't knock. It tore the sky open above Earth like paper and poured through. No ships, no armies. Just one presence, vast enough to eclipse the sun. A living wound in space-time shaped like every nightmare the universe ever had about itself. The moment it arrived, every human felt it in the marrow. The devourer. The end of stories. The thing our ancestors fled across timelines and buried under ice so it would never find us again. It looked at Earth the way a starving man looks at the last heartbeat on the menu. Then 8 billion voices answered at once. We didn't wait for orders, didn't need them. Every collar scar, every burned city, every child stolen, and every grave filled with our names lit up like fuses. The roar that went up wasn't sound, it was recognition. We've been running from this moment since the first caveman looked at the dark and decided to invent fire just to spite it. And we were done running. The man from the vault, Cain, Abel, Adam, whatever his real name was, stood on the melted plain where Antarctica used to be. Naked and glowing, arms spread like he was greeting an old friend. Around him the ice had become an ocean of liquid mirrors reflecting every human face that had ever lived. Leela stood at his right hand. 10 years old and older than galaxies, eyes blazing gold. I tried to pull her back. She kissed my cheek instead and whispered, "Watch, Daddy, this is why we kept the fire." Then she stepped forward and the war began. It didn't look like war at first, it looked like singing. Every human still capable of standing soldier, farmer, child, elder felt the same pull, the same note rising in the chest. We opened our mouths and let it out. Not words, not music. Something older? The sound a species makes when it remembers it was never prey. The devourer recoiled, edges fraying like smoke and wind, because for the first time in its endless hunger it heard something it didn't understand. Refusal, that was when the fleet arrived. Not ours, theirs the ones who'd buried the weapon and run. Hundreds of thousands of ships, sleek and ancient and scarred by wars that ended suns, dropping out of folds we didn't know existed. Their herald broadcast on every band, "Stand down, you are not ready. You will tear reality apart." Cain laughed, and the sound cracked countenance. "Ready?" he called back, voice rolling across the planet like thunder made of joy. "We were born ready. You just forgot what the word meant." The devourer lunged, and humanity met it halfway. Mara was in the cockpit of a patched-together interceptor before I could stop her, kissing me hard and fast, tasting like coffee and goodbye that wasn't goodbye anymore. "Tell the kids their mom's going hunting." She grinned, and then she was gone, leading a wing of pilots who learned to fly on hope and spite. Danny was already on the Defiance Bridge, voice steady as he ordered every gun we had to open fire on something the size of God's anger. Katya stood on the surface with a jury-rigged cannon made from the melted-down thrones of 100 Crush Lords, screaming Russian curses that translated roughly to "come get some." I stayed with Cain and Leela because someone had to, and because my daughter looked at me with ancient eyes and said, "You kept us human, Daddy. Let us keep you alive." The devourer hit the atmosphere like a tidal wave of nothing, erasing everything it touched. Cities, oceans, memories. But every place it consumed, humans stood in the way and refused to be erased. Old men in wheelchairs, kids with homemade bombs, mothers holding babies and screaming defiance until their voices became weapons. Where they fell, more stepped forward. Not because we were immortal, because dying angry was still better than living afraid. And something started to happen. Every time a human refused to blink, the devourer shrank. Every time we laughed in its face, it bled. Because the weapon our ancestors left wasn't a bomb or a virus or a gun. It was us. The stubborn, vicious, loving, impossible refusal to let the story end on anyone else's terms. We were the entropy killer. The story that refused to die? Kane raised his arms and the mirrors rose with him, 8 billion reflections becoming one vast shining thing. Lila took my hand. I took Mara's over the comb when she flew past low enough to touch. Danny's voice joined the chorus from orbit. Katya's laugh cracked across the planet like breaking chains. We became the roar. The devourer screamed, a sound that shredded minds and boiled oceans, and for one terrible second I thought we'd lost. Then I looked at my daughter, at the glow in her eyes that was every human who'd ever lived and ever would, and I understood the final piece. It wasn't about being stronger, it was about being too stupid to surrender. I kissed Lila's forehead, tasted starlight and little girl's sweat, and added my voice to the chorus. Not for Earth, not for freedom, for the 7-year-old who once believed her daddy could fix the stars. The roar became light. Light became fire. Fire became a single, perfect moment where 8 billion humans looked at the thing that ate universes and said, with one voice, not fucking today. The devourer shattered, not exploded, not retreated, shattered, like glass under a hammer made of pure, distilled spite. Pieces of it fell across the system as harmless meteors that burned up screaming in Earth's atmosphere. The ancient fleet tried to flee and found every fold sealed by children, laughing in a language that broke physics. They surrendered in the end, not to weapons, but to the simple, terrible truth that they'd spent lifetimes running from. Humans don't lose. We just decide when the game is over. When the light faded, Earth was still there. Scarred, bleeding, beautiful. The sky was blue again. Kane was gone, dissolved into the mirrors that now showed only our own faces. Lila was 10 years old again, crying in my arms because the weight of galaxies was too much for small shoulders. Mara landed her interceptor in a wheat field in Kansas and walked out laughing so hard she couldn't T-stand. Danny brought Defiant down in the Pacific and stepped onto the deck barefoot like a man coming home from war. Katya opened a bottle of real vodka and poured 8 billion shots into the sea. We didn't ascend. We didn't become gods. We stayed messy, broken, human. But the universe learned a new law that day, written in the blood and laughter of a species that refused to die politely. Mess with humans, and eventually, we stop surviving. We start winning, and we never, ever stop. Lila fell asleep on my chest that night under a sky full of ships that would never threaten us again. I felt her heartbeat steady and small and perfect, and I whispered the only bedtime story that mattered anymore. Once upon a time, the dark thought it could eat us. We taught it better. She smiled in her sleep. Somewhere out there, new stars were being born. And for the first time in history, they were afraid of us. Humanity didn't just survive, we roared, and the galaxy finally shut up and listened. Years later, when the galaxy spoke of us, and it always spoke of us now, they never started with the war. They started with the morning after. I was 43, half my body rebuilt from crash parts and human stubbornness, sitting on the front porch of a little house in what used to be Wyoming. The sky was stupidly blue, the kind of blue that makes you forgive everything. Leela, 20 now, taller than me, eyes still carrying that old gold when she wasn't paying attention, was teaching her little brother how to throw a curveball with a baseball stitched from real leather. Mara leaned in the doorway behind me, coffee in one hand, my dog tags in the other, spinning them the way she did when she was pretending not to cry. Earth never looked more like Earth than it did that day. We didn't leave. A lot of people thought we would pack up, seed the stars, become the thing that goes bump in the galactic night forever. Some did. There are human colonies now, from Andromeda to the Perseus Veil, places where kids grow up speaking languages that never existed before we needed them. But most of us stayed. We'd spent so long having our home taken from us that when we finally got it back, we planted our feet like we were daring someone to try again. The Devourer's corpse became the rings around Saturn, beautiful, harmless, a reminder. The ancient fleet that once ran from the fight, they asked permission to settle in the Kuiper Belt. We let them. Turns out when you break the thing they were terrified of, they look at you like you're the new apocalypse. We gave them farming tools instead of guns. They still flinch when a human laughs too loud. Danny never came dirtside again. He commands the first extrasolar guard out past Proxima, flying a ship the size of a continent with the crew that calls him Uncle Admiral, whether he likes it or not. He sends Hollis every Sunday. Last one had him gray at the temples, holding his first granddaughter, telling her the story of how her great-uncle once flew a torpedo into hell with a joke and a prayer. He still cries when he thinks I'm not looking. Katya went home to Siberia, turned an old gulag into the best damn engineering school in the system. Kids from 50 species learn there now, and every graduate has to spend 1 year rebuilding something the war broke. She says it's penance. I say it's love wearing coveralls. Mara and I got married on the cracked flight deck of the Defiant. with Leela walking both of us down the aisle because someone had to keep you idiots from tripping. We never did the big white dress thing. She wore her flight jacket, I wore scars, and the preacher was a former Kresh priest who converted after watching humans sing the end of the universe into submission. He still clicks when he gets nervous. As for me, I teach history at a little school in Laramie. Real history, the kind that doesn't get sanitized. I tell them about the collars, the pits, the day we thought the story was over. I tell them about a 10-year-old girl who remembered her father across a broken mind. I tell them the truth. We almost lost. We almost knelt. But something in us, something ancient and stupid and beautiful, looked at the dark and chose to burn instead of bow. And every year on the anniversary of the roar, the whole planet goes quiet for 1 minute. 8 billion people, plus however many billion more, are out there now. Stop whatever they're doing and just breathe together. You can feel it across light years, a pulse, a heartbeat, a promise. We remember the ones who didn't make it to this morning. We remember the ones who did. Lila's youngest, my grandson, Elias IV, because apparently we're that family now, asked me once why the aliens still look scared when they say the word human. I told him the truth. Because we're the only species that ever beat death by refusing to acknowledge it was our turn. He thought about that, nodded, and went back to throwing a curveball that still hasn't learned how to curve. That's the legacy, not the fleets or the rings or the colonies. It's porches in Wyoming and kids learning to throw balls and old soldiers crying over coffee because the sky stayed blue one more day. It's the quiet knowledge that somewhere out there, something older than time is still running. And every time it looks over its shoulder, we're still gaining. We didn't become gods. We didn't need to. We just became the story. Nothing wants to end badly. The galaxy learned to say our name like a prayer and a warning in the same breath. And every night, before I go to sleep next to the woman who flew through hell to bring me home, I look out at the stars, our stars now, and I whispered the same thing. I whispered the day I thought I was dying inside a Kresh dreadnought. Joke's on them. Because humanity didn't just survive. We became the reason the dark keeps the lights on. And we're still here. Still laughing. Still home. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.